for letting me be a part of it.
Yeah, thanks for coming out. So, just as we're getting started, for the people who haven't heard of Levi the Poet or aren't familiar with what you do, what would you want them to know about what you do, first and foremost?
About what I do. I mean, I write poetry, and I write other things as well, and perform a lot of those things. So, I've been doing the spoken word performance poetry for the last 8 years. This summer is the first tour that I ever went on, was 8 years ago, which is really, really weird and kind of crazy. It makes me want to freak out inside of my mind. I do freak out inside of my mind, but I'm still doing it. So I don't know. I mean, I got started in the hardcore scene, which is what I was really into at the time, and my now wife was really into it, and so she kind of introduced me to a lot of the bands that I even started going out on the road with, and just sort of kept on going with stuff from there. So I see that correspondence vinyl on your wall. That's tight. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
It's been a little while since I put that out. I think I'm overdue. So I'm like working on some stuff right now and really trying hard to do some more of it coming up here in the near future. So
sweet.
Yeah.
So obviously Correspondence is a lot different than your albums before Correspondence. So for what you put out next, whether that be an album or whatever, are you gonna go more towards like the fiction?
No, I don't. Not as far. Not from the looks of things, anyway. For originally, my idea for another album was going to be another narrative that was going to be sort of some sort of combination between the fiction and just kind of a bunch of things that I've been trying to say and articulate and having kind of a hard time with, but maybe I'm finally getting somewhere. Although it's not turning out to be, like a story, like a horizontal, linear narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I've gone through a bunch of different transitions of what I want to do with the pieces that I have now, and I'm still not 100% set on them, but finally do have some plans in place. So just really working on like getting that stuff locked in really recently, and then hopefully having something out a little bit later on this year. So I'm excited about that, but it's definitely been a weird process getting to it. My head has been kind of all over the place with what I thought would come out next and what it's actually looking like. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. That's the best I've got for either one of us right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. So with your new thing that you're doing, the Fraction part of your project, I know you've released emailed out a few poems. Are those going to be part of the album that you end up releasing, or
maybe?
Okay.
I don't know, and that's not even really a. I think that there will be portions of those. Mm-hmm. Fraction for me began as an experiment last year that I thought could be fun, and reached out to all of the people that were a part of it, or just what my regular mailing list thing was, and was just like, hey, I'd like to challenge myself to write more. would you like that? Mm-hmm. And so I kind of almost positioned Fraction as like a beta writing group thing that may become something and may not, so not everything that comes out through that is necessarily means that it's going to be like an early release for something brand new. But I do think that there are themes that I've explored in some of the Fraction stuff recently that will make their way into what the next release is. So I'm excited about that.
Cool. So now I can't remember, and I should have thought about this earlier, but you wrote a poem semi-recently, I think, that you emailed, and I think it was about, like, the Mark Driscoll controversy. Is that right, or did you release that a long time ago, and I
I've written multiple things about that stuff.
Okay.
And I'm not done writing things about that stuff either. Okay. So I have put out a couple of things that, I very just like blatantly say, hey, this is about this. Mm-hmm. And then there's some other stuff that probably came as a result of that. But yeah, I definitely know that whether it's through Fraction or just my blog or whatever, that people have heard some of that from me. Yeah.
I was going to ask, just off of that, like, I know that you experienced, like, hurt and stuff, because I remember, like, some stuff you put out, like, when it was really big and stuff, and, so I was just wondering if that's still, painful for you, and if it has changed your view of the church, or the Reformed tradition, or how, or...
That's a great question. Yes to all of the above. Mm-hmm. I've been very surprised at how painful certain things continue to be. Mm-hmm. And then also, honestly, that's a lot of what I've, kind of trying to been worked through in some of the writing, I think, too, because I feel like it has opened my eyes to things that I was blind to, mm-hmm. And that I would like to say something about, but personally want to be able to do that in a way that doesn't just look like, anger and vilification and all of that type of stuff too. So I've been quicker to speak than I feel like the Spirit has let me, if I can say it that way, because I think that I've learned a lot through this time, but haven't really had the words to be able to articulate what those things are. And mm-hmm. So that's still been a part of this whole process. And I'm kind of at a different place, I feel like, with my art, to where I don't feel this way, and have been encouraged to not feel as though everything that I put out has to hit quite so close to home. Mm-hmm. And yet at the same time, that's very much just a part of who I am and what I've wanted to express through what this Levi the Poet project is. And so I think that we're at an interesting time right now where a lot of people are going through, at least a lot of people my age are kind of going, like, that's kind of one of the cool things about having started this so young with kids that were my age, is like we've all kind of grown up together mm-hmm. and gone through similar things in our perspective circumstances. And so I feel like there's a large group of people right now who have sort of had to deal with the pain of fallout. And some of that is just growing up too, mm-hmm. Like coming to different conclusions, but some of the disillusionment, some of that, I mean, it's almost frustratingly cliche to be a deconstructionist mm-hmm. at the moment, but that's not for no reason either. And so I think some of my stuff with Mars, even going back to what you had referenced way back in the day, is like, how do I articulate some of this stuff well and not just be another, like, pissed off voice in the crowd, mm-hmm. because I think it's okay to be pissed off about stuff, but I would like to see it resolved somewhere as well. And unfortunately, if you're still in the middle of all of that and haven't seen all of it, it's hard to get there. You can't force that either. So that's a good question, though. I mean, that's stuff that I've been trying to wrestle through for a long time, and it's stuff that's definitely more present than I wish that it was.
Right.
If I'm totally honest, mm-hmm. And I think it's the case for a lot of people. Like, I don't know if you've listened to the Bad Christian podcast.
That's actually what made me think of it, because I was listening to it last night.
Yeah, so like recently, I mean, they've had a couple of people on to just kind of talk about their experiences and stuff, and I know a lot of people see that as just, at this point, divisive or whatever, but I actually think that it's helpful. Mm-hmm. And so it's just an interesting place for a lot of people to be in, mm-hmm. but it is what it is too.
Yeah. One of your poem, The Bride, Like, anytime I have any kind of, like, struggle with the church, I think of that poem, and like, it just, like, recurs in my head. So, anyways, that's been helpful for me, but...
That's awesome.
It's not about me. So.
I thank you for that. And I've had to remember that poem in recent years, too, you know? There's this sort of theme that I'm kind of messing with for this record. I don't know where I guess I can just say this now, it's fine, but I don't know exactly where the quote came from, but the idea, there's this quote, and it sounds very repetitive, and it is, but the idea is that at first the river is a river and the mountain is a mountain, and then the river is no longer a river and the mountain is no longer a mountain, and then the river is a river again and the mountain is a mountain. And maybe they don't look exactly the same, that, you know, obviously the hope or the light at the end of that tunnel being like, hey, I will see things clearly again, but the perspective may not be the same or whatever. And so I kind of feel like, I almost feel like a lot of what I'm trying to work through right now is a revisiting of some of that same thematic stuff that I did go through in past albums, but, you know, we'll see. Yeah. We'll see how it ends up finally playing itself out, which is cool.
Cool. Yeah. I know that I was looking at other interviews, so I don't ask the same questions all the time.
Oh, that's cool.
But I saw that you really like Martin Luther, and that was like one of your people that you would want to meet and stuff. So I was wondering if you had any like contemporary, like theologians or pastors or teachers or that have been influential for you.
That's interesting. I mean, I continue. I mean, even earlier, you had asked about some of the like Reformed perspective and different things like that, and I continue to hold so many of those guys in such high regard. I mean, contemporary, pastors or preachers or different things like that. I mean, I can list a slew of them that have made a huge influence on my life throughout the years, whether that's, like Piper or Keller or, I mean, definitely for a while there, like I really did view kind of Mark in that light. And, and so, yeah, I mean, I think that some of that still exists. And that's another thing. Like, I don't want to just write off that, like a whole tribe. And I don't, one of my friends, Preston Sprinkle, talks about being a lowercase r Reformed guy. Like, and I kind of dig that. Like, I'm not 100% sure where I've landed on some of the things that, I once like championed with a whole lot more confidence than I feel in a little bit of it now. But still, I think, I mean, sure, I'd be honored to shake hands with those dudes and say thank you for their contributions to my life. And more recently, there's a guy named Brian Zond, who's out of Missouri, not really a part of that world as much, but I just met him at a conference that we both did together down in Southern California. And I'm reading a book of his called Water to Wine. And it's basically just about his, like, coming to a deeper, more contemplative kind of faith and kind of moving out of what he calls like pop Christianity and into, and I'm not saying that's what anyone else, I'm not making a blanket statement about anyone, but there are certain things that he says in that book that I'm reading and being like, oh man, he's writing this book about me, and it's been really helpful. So that's been cool too, and things like that have been a part of bringing more of that clarity. So I'm pretty far away from the notion of like elevating a human in the way that I have in the past as like the dude that I'm going to go after or whatever, but I'm definitely trying to be a little bit more ecumenical in my approach to understanding my faith and who this person named Jesus that I call Savior is. So I realized that was kind of like a longer answer to your question, but that's sort of where I feel like I'm at with things right now.
Sweet. This is just out of curiosity, last religious question, because I know I've asked like a lot. Anyways, so I was talking to my coworker whenever we were talking about the soundstage stuff, and like, so we were talking about the hardcore scene and the metal scene and all of that, and like how frequently it happens where a band starts out really like heavily Christian and then ends up really heavily against that. And so this doesn't really have to do with you, but I was just going to ask, like, why you think that is? Because I know you've been a part of that scene and everything.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good question, and I don't think that at one point in time I wrote like some blog stuff and some kind of that I thought would be helpful that was literally specifically about that. Like it basically was your question and then answered it, and the way that I would have answered it then I think has to do with one, it's just hard to be on the road constantly and detached from any sort of familiarity in your own place that keeps you level and grounded. To travel just constantly exposes you to different cultures and different worlds, and all of a sudden the people that were once the enemies don't look so much like enemies anymore, and the things that were, and some of that's good, right? Like some of the, I mean, I love travel for that reason. Like my wife and I, Brandy and a couple of our friends last year, we got to visit Europe, and that was more of just like a vacation trip, not a tour trip, but we almost didn't go, and it was like, at this point, it's like, man, I cannot wait to get back, because you just have, it's just all new, you know, like you just get to see a different part of a thing that you didn't understand, and that's part of why I'm a little bit more reticent to give immediate, like, oh, this is a one-stop shop answer for everything in relation to this scenario, like this will fix it, which is a way that I feel like I thought about a lot of things for a long time, and I just think that some stuff is more nuanced than that now. But you're right. I mean, I see that trend a lot, and when I was out in California for that conference with Brian Zond, I told him a little bit about some of the church stuff and then some of my work, and he just said, I mean, he literally was like, well, how he just was like, how are you still a Christian? And I thought, you know, like, oh, that's a pretty blatant, just kind of a straightforward question, and I don't really have an answer for it outside of like mercy, because there's a lot of times that I don't think that I am, if I'm going to be completely honest, and so I don't fall too far from that tree a lot of the times, where it's just like, gosh, I don't know if I want to have anything to do with this anymore, and I think that that's a place where a lot of bands end up. And there is something to, like, hey, like I've been a part of a church for a long time that's been, you know, pretty messed up if you look at our history, but still a part of a thing that has kept me around a consistent group of friends and people that I can work through some stuff with, whether all of our stuff has been very imperfect. I'm not saying that that's a fix-it thing, but I do know that it's been helpful for me personally to have a little bit more grounding in that way, knowing that I'm constantly gone all the time. So I don't know. I mean, I think that people change, and I think that a lot of times as a believer we can be like really quick to just write those people off for their changes, but I also have to derive some hope from the fact that I'm not in control of any of that, and I don't know the way that the rest of this timeline is going to play out, and I would hope that for myself, where I would hope that there would be mercy extended to me, you know, if that ever was a thing that ended up happening. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of wrestle at times myself with the way that people will perceive some of the stuff that I write, because a big evangelical pastor like Rob Bell posits a bunch of questions and then people write them off for it. I can ask some questions as like a little bit more of an artist person without everyone assuming that all of those questions are conclusions already. But I mean, there are a lot of the same questions, you know. I kind of like asking those kinds of questions, and so I don't know. It's been an interesting thing to watch, because I have a lot of friends in bands that started out a way and then now they're not, just like you said, you know. But I started out a way too. I mean, Correspondence wasn't, you know, it wasn't an altar call album or anything like that, you know, and I wrestle a lot with I struggle with when I am actually doing something that's true to who I am in relation to the faith that has been granted to me versus selling doves in the marketplace.
Right.
And I don't know who's doing which, and it's not my job to ascribe motive, but I personally have more and more of an issue with it that I don't necessarily feel comfortable with, and that's all for some reason related to the question that you just asked me.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay.
So on a little bit of a lighter note, so people who haven't been to any of your shows or don't follow you on social media may not know that you're really silly and goofy. So do you have like a favorite comedian or favorite like funny show?
That's funny. I actually don't watch that much comedy, and Brandy hates stand-up, so I hardly ever watch any stand-up either. I feel like, but yeah, you're right. I mean, for a long time, I didn't really know what to do with any of that because all of my poetry was so serious.
Yeah.
So I'd go to a show and make a joke, and people would just stare at me like, like so uncomfortable, like, oh, I made a joke or whatever. So I don't really have anything to give you. I generally do. I'm still drawn to like really serious stuff, but I feel relatively ridiculous most of the time. So I
you gotta let it out. So.
Yeah.
So I know that you you've referenced bands that you've been influenced by in the past and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I can name a few, but I mean, a lot of people already know that. So I was wondering if there were any like poets that influenced you in particular.
So, I mean, Bradley Hathaway is a dude that he was the first guy that I ever saw doing anything like this, and I wanted to do it after I saw that. So, like, it would be wrong for me to not put his name in there. Although I will say, and I think that he, whatever. I was definitely a fan of his poetry stuff. He was not a fan of mine, which is totally fine. And in hindsight, I'm not as much a fan of his poetry stuff. He actually just put out an album called, what is it called? He just put out an album. He dropped it on Good Friday. I just listened to it, and it is rough. I mean, rough and so I listened to it and I saw the promo for it and I just thought, the dude has lost his mind. Like we're friends and I'm going to joke, or I'm going to tell him that because I listened to it and I actually liked it. But basically it's about this. I mean, I don't really, anyway, he's one of them. I like him a lot. He just came out with a new record and it's not for the faint of heart. Another guy's name is Buddy Wakefield, and he's a poet from Seattle, Washington, who's not in any of the same types of circuits as anything that I've ever been in. And I think, I know a much more well-known name out there than me or a lot of other poets that I know or know of. But he's pretty amazing. He's got one record out called Live at the Something Piano. Buddy Wakefield, anyway, he's a great storyteller, and I've really enjoyed some of his stuff. Like Dan from Listener is a good friend, and I love the stuff that he writes. I'm trying to think. Saul Williams was a dude that I was really into, and he's like, I haven't heard his name around quite as much, but I know he's still doing stuff, and I've seen him perform multiple times. I love the stuff that the Humble Beast guys are doing. Prop and Jay Gibbons is like, I just think that his album Fly Exam was just phenomenal. I listened to it so many times. So I know that's kind of more into the hip hop world, but I honestly didn't listen to a ton of poets growing up, and still haven't. Like it's been an art form that I've had to come to appreciate as I've been around it a little bit more. But even as a poet, I haven't really been around the poetry community that much. I've been in the music thing. So It's just been, I never know quite what to do with that question other than reference lyricists who I would give the same credibility to, So.
Would you ever want to, like, write poetry, like a book of poetry or anything like that?
Yeah, and I've been saying that I was going to for years and years and years. I truly, like, one of the projects on the table is to do a book of poetry with all of the albums that I have thus far, maybe with a little bit of commentary to go along with it, and then other pieces that I haven't ever released. Mm-hmm. It's almost more of like a memoir journal type thing through the first 8 years of doing this. And if I can ever get to it, then that's what's going to happen. So that's definitely a thing, yeah. Cool. And I'd like to do similar type stuff with Fraction, too. I mean, come June, I'll have done a full year's worth of stuff, and I think it'd just be really fun to publish those weeklies, clean them up and add a couple of other things to them and have that in a physical format as well. So I've got some ideas, and it's not all over yet, but I'm just getting to it.
Yeah, cool. So I think I know the answer to this question, but is there an album that just recently you can't get enough of?
Are you going to say Kendrick?
Yeah.
I'm so into that. I'm so into Kendrick. I'm like, somebody sent out a hilarious tweet the other day that was like, Kendrick breathes, and then then he says Levi, and it's got a picture of Elmo saying, like, oh my God, the GOAT. And there's like an atomic bomb thing going. It just made me laugh. I've definitely not been silent about being hella into that new Kendrick record. So I really like that. I've been listening, like, over the last, I don't know a ton of stuff that's come out super recently, but David Bazan put out like 3 records in the course of a year. He did Blanco, and then a Christmas EP, and then whatever his new one is called, Care. And then today I just saw that he posted some other single. So that dude is like, I feel like for indie musicians and stuff, like, that guy's kind of a go-to for the way that he's doing stuff and always has been. He's just so, I just love him. And he's been such a hard worker. So I've been listening to both of those a lot. I don't know. I'm trying to see. Let me just see here. Let's see what else is in my Spotify. Yes, I use Spotify, even though it strips you of everything that you are. So let's see. These are the albums that I have up. Damn by Kendrick Lamar. Flesh Eater, that's the one by Bradley Hathaway.
Okay.
Dog Problems by The Format, which is not new at all. Beyond Control by King's Kaleidoscope.
Yes.
Chill Dummy by POS.
Okay.
He's a rapper from Minneapolis, and he is great. Cool. And then I listened to the new Conor Oberst record. He's another guy that I'd put under the list of poets that I've been influenced by, for sure.
What do you remember, like, the first band that you ever remember really loving?
Well, I'll say them because it's so funny. I found them the other day. There's a hip hop group based out of Irvine, somewhere in Southern California, that was called the CMCs, and I've never been able to find them anywhere. Like, so I posted this Instagram story about it because I found it, and I was so excited because it's the first hip hop record that I ever heard that made me, like, that I remember listening to probably as a 6-year-old, like, walking around and getting into lyrics. And so that was like, I've looked everywhere for it. I thought that maybe I got the name wrong. Finally, I found it, and I got so excited. And my friend texted me and said, I think you're just really bad at Google. But I swear I could never find it anywhere. I looked on Spot anyway. So this artist, this hip hop group called the CMCs, I found their record on Spotify, and I was super excited about that. So I've gone back and listened to it, and I mean, I love it. I love it as much as I did as a 6-year-old. So that was pretty dope. that was like kind of the first thing that I remember making me think, oh man, I love rap. So it was cool.
That's awesome. Do you have like a favorite way of listening to music? Like my favorite way is to listen to it on a turntable and to read the lyrics while I listen. So do you have a favorite?
That's awesome. So yeah, I mean, I would say record is like the most aesthetically pleasing sort of a way to do something like that. I don't have a record player right now, or we have one, and I don't know actually what happened to it. We need to get it out, but I love that. I really love, like a couple of months ago, me and Brandy watched again Bazan. Like we watched his just like a YouTube playlist of him just playing shows, and I really like that. I really like, if you can find a good quality live recording, because it's usually probably a little bit of a different rendition of whatever the album sounds like, and you get to sort of see the emotion that these people are putting into their performances. And I always thought that about poetry. Like I'm so thankful that people buy my records, but I'm always kind of astounded too, because I think that poetry, at least for me, like if I'm going to really enjoy it, I want to see the person perform that piece and see I want to see body language. I want to see all of that type of stuff. So that was fun. We probably watched 2 hours worth of YouTube. It was all just like, and I never do that. And Brandy hates watching videos. So, but like Bon Iver put out that NPR recording of their new record, the 22 a million thing. And that is just incredible to watch them all do it. So that's a way that I really like. I definitely love reading lyrics alongside the record. So I like if something new comes out, sometimes I'll hop right on it and just be so stoked that I can't wait to listen to it. But I like to be able to listen to it all the way through if I can. So that's that, I guess.
Cool. Well, those are most of the questions I have, I think. Is there anything else that you would like the whole world or just 100 people to know?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for letting me be a part of your new thing. I'm excited to see what it becomes. That's cool. Send it and I'll share it and stuff. I think I've just been kind of laying a lot lower than normal over the past however many years I've done this. Some of that has been personal stuff, and some of it has just been me putting time into trying to get some new stuff out, which is just things that different people have to take time for. But I'm really excited about being able to share things again. Honestly, for the first time in a long time, I've kind of gotten excited, man, sweet, let's, do this again. And so, I don't know, that's been fun. We've got stuff coming up, whether that's releases or tours or whatever. And the fraction thing, I think, has been pretty cool. So, I mean, that's definitely something I would just say something about, which is, hey, there's this weekly letter thing that I've been doing through fraction, and it seems like people are enjoying it, and I'm thankful for that. It's definitely different and not really related to tour or album releases, but it's new stuff on a weekly basis that's fun to have a conversation about with the people that are a part of it. So I don't know. I think probably just both of those things, and we'll let everybody know when new stuff is coming. So Sweet. That's that.
That's awesome.